and welcome to the Really Helpful Club. I'm Sarah Austin, and this is our In Conversation series where we shine the spotlight on entrepreneurs, business owners, people who are experts in their field, and they're all here to help members of our community to be able to navigate different challenges and transitions and different chapters in their life. And I love this series because this is where we shine the spotlight on the business owner. We find out what their journey is, where they've come from, why they do what they do. It's so interesting because actually quite often they've had an experience themselves, which means that that's the rationale behind why they've launched their business. They absolutely understand and have the insights to be able to do that. And my guest today is no exception. Her name is Chloe Oudiz, and she's a divorce and separation coach. And I think it is fascinating because there's so much narrative, I think, in the press, in the media, and just sort of in society today, how the growing divorce rates, and I think there's a growing amount of resource and support out there that many people need to be able to access in order to be able to So I'm going to be talking to Chloe. Chloe's just coming on to join me now. And she's going to talk about her own journey. She's going to, here we go.
Hello, Sarah.
Didn't want to steal your thunder. I was just sort of talking a little bit about, the concept of a divorce coach, and actually how this is I guess a burgeoning, I hate to use the word market, but this is a burgeoning need, I think, in society. Anyway, here we are. In our latest In Conversation interview, in part of our series. I think, Chloe, you are my 76th interviewee. Oh. And so hopefully we're doing something right. Hopefully we sort of vaguely know what we're doing by now. As we're joined by people, it's going to be really nice. People will be able to talk about their own experiences, ask you questions, etc. I know that you've done lots of Instagram lives, so you kind of know how this works. This is lovely, relaxed, informal. And what we do is, this is a kind of a journey where we want to understand a bit about you, your background.
Yeah.
I think the journey to someone's, this isn't necessarily your end destination, but the journey to the destination thus far is every bit as interesting as what you do. It's why you do it, I think, which is so interesting. Yeah. And obviously, I've billed you as a divorce and a separation coach, and lots of people will be wondering when they go to watch this chat later on, what is that? Mm-hmm. So we want to know a bit about that, how you help people, and just why this is so important. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start at Chloe Oudiz and who you are, what you are, how you come to be working in the UK, doing what you do, and what's your journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. A good place to start, actually. So as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm not. I am half French, half American. I was born and raised in Paris to a French father and American mother, and I have been living abroad for over 20 years. So I'm a bit of a serial expat. I've been in the UK for quite a while, and I did my studies. I went to law school in France, and then I studied international affairs in New York. And so I have, again, that international background in that context. On the personal front, which is really where my journey led me to where I am today, I started working in the corporate world, and I had a traditional career, moving up the corporate ladder. But when I got divorced about 10 years ago, I was definitely one of the first in my circle of friends. My children were very young. And so I kind of became the one divorced person people knew. And so a lot of my friends, as they were crossing that bridge or exploring it, came to see me for advice, for information, for sometimes just a shoulder to cry on. Yeah. And little by little, more and more people were coming to me, friends, colleagues, friends of friends. And I realized that there was really something missing in the offerings out there. And that really is that concept of an informed best friend. Somebody you can talk to without having to pay the rates you would pay for a lawyer, because it isn't the legal matters they're discussing with me, but somebody who knows what they're talking about and who is unbiased and who can give you real information around what the process looks like, what to expect, and how to prepare for every step of the way.
It's really interesting that, and I think, you know, your own personal insights are so interesting here, and I love that description of an informed best friend, because I think that's exactly what it is. And you know, when this happens to somebody, or you know, or where they make that decision themselves, either to separate or to, you know, take it to that next stage of divorce, it's really interesting, because it is. I remember I was watching an Instagram interview with Mel
Oh,
Robbins,
yes.
and who I don't know if you're familiar with her book, Let Them, and
Yes.
it's really interesting because she talks about sort of heartbreak and breakup and things, and it's really interesting because that kind of separation process is, you know, she talks about it. You know, this person's part of your nervous system. Mm-hmm. You know, you haven't just got these sort of intertwining lives, and as you know, as you went through, intertwining, you know, children. That there's a huge amount that you've built this infrastructure. You've grown together.
Yeah.
And so that separation process is you know, it isn't like, I think, anything else that someone can go through, because it is a sort of breakdown of that ecosystem, that nervous system, the physical day-to-day of not being with someone, and just, you know, no longer operating as a team.
Yeah.
With a shared, you know, there's still many overlapping and shared goals, but not necessarily together, with your lives going forward together. And I think it is really interesting, because there you are, you know, you said that you had a number of friends who came to you because you were, you know, it's that classic thing of, you know, you know, you had experience, so therefore you were able to help them. You had the insight in a way that, you know, that other friends weren't able to. So you were able to step in and step up, as it were. But I think what is so interesting is it's one of those very important life events, mm-hmm. which is a curveball, and no one sets out to separate. No one sets out to divorce. But it's a real sort of disconnect between your previous life and now that current life. And it's as if you need this new tribe around you, because so much about it is changing and is going to change as you go forward. So I think what you're doing is really interesting. And so tell us a little bit about, you know, you sort of intimated it a little bit there, is the difference between what you offer, so a divorce coach and a divorce and separation coach, and tell us a little bit why someone would want to come to someone like you in the first place. Yeah. You know, why not just stick to your best friend who knows you intimately, you know, your kind of your immediate resources around you. Why would someone come to a divorce coach? Because I think it's a very new and burgeoning service.
You're right.
So I think it's really important to understand what a divorce separation coach is.
Yeah, and that's a very good question. You know, it's like any coach. The whole way a coach works is to help you set objectives and help you reach them. So if you think of, you want to change careers, you go to see a career coach. They're going to start by making you define what your next job looks like or your next career looks like. And then they're going to help you get there. They're going to help you with the emotional resilience that it requires and with the practical skills, you know, CV writing, interview skills, etc. And so a divorce coach does the same thing. You know, we work with our clients to set goals of where they want to be after the divorce. What is that kind of light at the end of the tunnel? And I help them through the whole journey, the emotional side of things and the practical side. You know, the skills I teach is not CV writing or interviewing. It's conflict de-escalation. It's negotiation skills to help people to achieve a divorce that is smooth and that is fairly amicable, so that themselves and their families come out of it in the best possible state.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And so, and of course, you mentioned, you know, in your opening response about a lawyer.
Yes.
So what is the difference between what you do and why would someone not just go straight to a lawyer? Because of course, you know, and do you need to go to a lawyer? I mean, that's the other thing.
Well, I think you touched upon it, right? Divorce is not just a legal problem. There is that emotional uncoupling that happens as well. And there's the emotional journey that you're going through. It's not just about filing paperwork. Working as a team with lawyers, as I do, is really important. I think anything that's difficult in life takes a team. If you think of professional athletes, they have a physiotherapist, a coach, a nutritionist, a sports therapist, etc. And it's the same thing with any kind of difficult transition. You want to be surrounded by the right people.
Yeah.
And so the lawyer is the right person for the legal advice, but you might need also a financial advisor to help you with the finances. You might need a co-parenting coach if that's one of your challenges. And the divorce coach is really somebody who holds your hand throughout the whole process and makes sure that you are completely prepared for every step. So before something hits you and before it feels like your divorce is being done to you, you are in full control of the process. You know what the next step is. You know what you want to get out of it. And you know that you are prepared logistically and emotionally.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I guess, whichever side of the conversation you're on, whether you are the person triggering that change in circumstance, or it being done to you, as it were, it feels like you've been hit by a truck.
Yeah, because it was in the plan. That's what you were
Yeah,
saying earlier. But
yeah, and no one sort of walks down the aisle or moves into a sort of cohabitation arrangement and then creates a household, creates a family, expecting this to happen. And so so tell us a little bit about your services and maybe kind of one or two examples of how you help clients, because I imagine the people who'll be watching this either now or later on and sort of months to come, and they'll go, okay, well look, that sounds really interesting. At what point would I want to get in touch with someone like a Chloe?
Yeah.
And at what point would I want to get in touch with a lawyer? And at what point, so it's kind of, here you are, it's sort of New Year's Day, and Christmas hasn't gone well. You've been building up to this for a while as a couple, and the decision is, not even been made, but the decision is sort of bubbling.
Yeah.
When would someone contact you, and how would you kick in? What would you, how would you go about the process with someone?
Yeah. A lot of my clients come to me just at that threshold that you're describing, because actually, again, it's not just a legal process. And before you can start the legal process, there's a whole bunch of steps that happen in your personal life, starting with how do you tell your spouse, and dealing with that, and dealing with the emotional readiness to actually start having conversations about how you're going to split the finances or your time with the children. So ideally, my clients come to me in the very early stages, and I help them get their ducks in a row, gather the information they need, whether it's, mortgage statements, pension statements, all that information they're going to need, but also make sure that they are fully prepared for what the road ahead looks like. So they have the right expectations, all the myths they might have in their head around how divorce works. We talk through and we try and debunk the ones that are really just assumptions. And it's really making sure that they are 100% ready by the time they do anything concrete about their decision. And so I actually just released a book that's coming out next week, which I'll show you here, which is called Don't Screw Up Your Divorce.
Yep.
I know you're coming tonight to
the problem with Instagram Live is it's backwards. So hopefully
I know it was
backwards.
mirroring.
Exactly. That is one of the downsides of doing a live. But Chloe, just tell us the name of the book again.
It's called Don't Screw Up Your Divorce, and it's available on Amazon worldwide. And I wrote it specifically for people who are in the situation we're just discussing, who are really in the early stages of the divorce process and feel very much like a rabbit in the headlights. There's the big fear of making the wrong decision or doing the wrong move and triggering a huge legal battle with their ex or soon to be ex. And that's where being informed makes such a difference. And I see it in my practice every day. People who come to me in those early stages were able from the very beginning to start things on the right foot, to keep the conversation appeased, to keep communication going between the spouses, and to make sure that things remain under control. Whereas when I have people come later on and we are trying to fix and retrofit things and rebuild trust and communication, it's a lot more difficult. So the difference in the outcomes of a divorce or a separation between those who are prepared and those who aren't is really night and day. And that's why I really want to share this information in the book.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so I guess it's, so if someone is even just thinking about it, having those thoughts of actually I feel something's changing. Sometimes the trigger can be the on the horizon, an empty nest.
That,
It can be something, some big event that's going on in your family setup,
yeah,
which therein then's the trigger. So your advice would be, if I understand you correctly, is even at that stage where you're just thinking about it, pick up the phone to you, come and have a cup of coffee, start that process of understanding what are the ducks you need to think about
yeah,
to put in order,
yeah,
and then to go, okay, fine, all right, well, let's start with stage one.
yeah,
And stage one could be, as you say, getting your financial affairs into order, knowing how you sit, and then you would be able to presumably signpost to a financial advisor. Because often what I think happens is that the conversations around finance, are quite traditional. They may have happened with, between the financial advisor and the male spouse in the household. And so actually you're kind of empowering people to begin to inform themselves, so they feel empowered, that then they can go to step two.
exactly. And really, my big piece of advice is to not rush in. I don't
Okay.
think you can have good negotiations and effective negotiations that are going to lead to long-term sustainable, health and financial health if you are too emotional. And so you need to make sure that you have taken the time to prepare and to process and to understand what things might look like and to deal with those emotions before you start having those very practical discussions, because the agreements you reach are going to impact your life in the long term, whether it's around finances or your children. And so it's really important to make sure that you're making those decisions as cool-headedly as possible and in a way that is fully considered. And so a lot of my work is helping people through that decision making and through the skills to negotiate agreements that align to their life objectives.
Yeah.
So that really where it comes, the rubber hits the road in terms of being prepared for these kind of life actions. And to come back to my analogy earlier with a career change, you wouldn't show up to an interview, completely winging it. You'd be very unlikely to get the job. You're not going to build a house starting with the roof. You need to make sure that you have everything prepared, you have the foundations, and then you can start building up.
Do you get people who come to you and actually because what you're helping them to do, I guess, is also, this is becoming reality because they're coming to see a professional, as it were, who's helping to crystallize this, to take whether they're at in the journey to the next step. Do people then go, actually, now I really think about it, but actually that's not what I
Mm-hmm.
want, and and to turn away?
Yeah, I've had a few. And, sometimes, once you face the reality of the decision you're about to make, you may decide actually that it's not the right decision for you. But you need to explore it. You need to be sure. And a lot of people need to go through that process of understanding what their life could look like if they proceeded.
Yeah.
And sometimes they decide to give it another shot. And I work with couples therapists that I refer people to if they think that there's a chance of saving their marriage, because that's, of course, always the preferred option.
Of course. Yeah, of course. And maybe I guess sort of, again, to sort of put a bit more colour on it, is because I imagine there'll be a lot of people who will watch this and go, yeah, I've never come across this before. This is so interesting. And I think this is what's so interesting. It's like that classic thing, almost like buses, where it's not quite like buses actually, where I know what a bus is, but no one really knows what a divorce coach is. And then suddenly I feel there's this emerging market, there's this emerging service. And so, there are other people like you emerging, who can help people. What do you think positions you differently from another divorce coach? I mean, is it really just about compatibility of, I really like this Chloe person, I think she's going to understand my circumstances and my situation, so it's a sort of touchy-feely feeling sort of thing? Or how, what would one divorce coach offer that another one might not? Is it or be different?
Well, of course, like with anybody, the contact and the trust you feel towards that person is really important. People work with people, so they need to feel comfortable with whoever they're working with. There's divorce coaches with all sorts of niches. There's some that specialize in families that special needs children, for example,
Yeah,
or families that have, I don't know, where one of the two has a mental illness, that kind of
of
thing.
course.
My specialty is expats and internationals. So because I have that background, as I mentioned earlier, of living as an expatriate, of getting divorced as an expatriate, and I have intimate knowledge of the French, the English, and the American jurisdictions and how those systems work, I'm able to guide people through the additional challenges that come up in that kind of context, and that don't necessarily apply in a local divorce.
Mm.
And so that's having that specialist expertise is really helpful. Thinking of the impact on your immigration visa, for example, if you get
Yeah, of course.
divorced, tax implications with regards to pensions that are abroad or properties that are abroad. All of that are things where somebody who's not informed, if you're working with a coach or a lawyer who isn't specialized, they're not going to know, and they're not going to be able to anticipate those issues. And then people wake up 5 years after their divorce and realize that they've made massive mistakes because they didn't know about those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that again goes back to that beginning where it is, you know, this abrupt, this sort of yes no decision that gets made,
Yeah.
and then the consequences of that, some intended and a lot unintended as well,
Yeah.
because it's only as you start to unpick the process, explore what's involved, that you start to look at these things. You're absolutely right, where again the importance of pensions and where we're located, and and again you're referring to different jurisdictions and things like that,
Yeah.
that again it's sort of like it's like the cool light of day, as it were. It's for sort of the hangover after the night before of smacking yourself around the face, saying actually you do realize that you're going to have to think about this and that, and actually it's really important, because you're absolutely right. You don't want to have that remorse afterwards, because the consequences of that are potentially enormous. So do you have an example of a kind of a client you've helped that I think that would be brilliant to kind of to bring it to life?
Yeah. So of course I can't name any names.
Okay. Exactly.
But recently I had a client who is living in Spain. She's not Spanish. Her husband is not Spanish, and they had agreed to divorce. But she had agreed that she was going to move back with him to his home country, even after the divorce. They were going to relocate as a family over there, and she was having second thoughts about whether that was the right way forward, because she wasn't sure that that was her life plan. It was more his than hers, and if they were divorcing, did that still make sense? And so we spent a lot of time working through that decision, the decision of itself, and exploring what her life could look like one way or another. And if there were any other options, there were middle grounds, and how we could think about how she was then going to bring that information to her ex, or soon to be ex, to make sure that he was on board, to avoid alienating him, and to try and make sure that they could work through the consequences of whatever decision she made. And so she was originally very kind of black and white, I need to commit, and I'm going to tell him I'm staying in Spain, or I'm going to his home country. But actually in the end, we ended up thinking of a third option, which is to agree a phased approach, where she wants to tell him just, for the next year, we're going to stay where we are, and let's agree to have a regular checkpoint, and to try and keep things open so it doesn't feel like he's being put in front of a fact and a decision that's been made for him. There's much more of an ongoing conversation. But having somebody to speak to, and to also think about the implications, if she went with him to his home country, what would that mean even at a legal level? If she wanted to move back later on, what kind of potential legal challenges would she have, so that she wouldn't, so that she considers those in her decision making.
Yeah, they're very, very interesting. And I guess, obviously these are quite complex sort of examples, and but you don't just help expats and people overseas. You would be very able and willing to help people in the UK as well.
Absolutely. I mean, really, there's a common, there's a common ground across all divorces, whether they're local or international.
Yeah.
And that's just my bread and butter. But what people often need when they're in an international context, and that additional knowledge. And so I can bring that additional expertise to people who are in that context. But of course, all of the emotional journey, the logistics, and the preparation required within any divorce, it's completely applicable in this context.
Very interesting, very helpful. And so tell us a bit more about the book. So obviously you've told us it's launching. This is hugely exciting, and again, I would imagine, there's lots of books written by celebs and sort of famous people who have got divorced and things, but this sounds like this is sort of almost like a manual.
It is. It's really
Tell us kind of how you've written it, how you've structured it, and if someone was going to buy it, what they're going to get from it.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It was really written in the spirit of being a guide, of giving people all the information they need, but overlaying, it's not just facts, that you can look on Google. It's also overlaying all of the expert tips that I share with my clients based on my experience and my experience working with other people, and helping them understand some of the mistakes that can be commonly made and the implications of those mistakes. So I structured the book around 8 chapters, which are really the 8 questions that I hear most people struggle with at that stage. There are questions like, can I afford to divorce?
Yeah.
Can I afford to be divorced?
Yeah.
How do I select the right profession? Who do I need, to surround myself with? How do I tell my spouse? How do I tell my children? Do I need to tell my employer? All of those questions are really scary and very valid concerns that people are often asking for information on, trying to gather facts, and to make sure that they have the right knowledge to make informed decisions. So that's why I wanted to bring all of that together in a single source of information that is a lot more reliable than ChatGPT and that has all of those real life experiences woven into it to highlight some of the examples that underpin the advice I'm giving.
And it's really, really interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost as if in this process, it's like you're doing an audit of your life, isn't it? In a way that you don't do this just we probably should, but most people don't before they get married. You typically would be, kind of in your 20s or your 30s, and you may have accumulated assets, but you're probably going to be really accumulating assets, hopefully then as a couple, sort of going down that sort of traditional narrative. But this is like an audit of you as a couple, you as an individual, you as a family, and what your assets look like, and it's a kind of, it's an emotional audit as well, isn't it? And so the irony is, I think, almost as if whatever has brought you to this stage of separation or stage of divorce, it's almost as if then that next thing of then having to go through mediation or go through negotiation or conversations with your spouse or with your soon-to-be ex, or whatever you want to style them, is it's almost as if you have to have more conversation, more connection, and more kind of disclosure than at any other time in the run up to that. I mean, it's almost an irony, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the difficulties, because the vast majority of marriages break down because communication breaks down. If it's not working during the marriage, it rarely works well during the divorce. And so a lot of my work is helping people to rebuild that trust, keep the communication going. And one of the mistakes that I see a lot of people doing, sometimes it's warranted if there's abuse, or, if it's a situation, but in the vast majority of marriages, you don't need to use a lawyer as your front man to kind of do the negotiations. And people tend to hide behind their lawyer because it's scary, because they don't know how to handle things. And the problem is that then they're no longer speaking to each other. And especially if you have children, you're going to have to make another million decisions together way after the divorce is finalized. And breaking that relationship and that communication has really long-term consequences. And a lot of the work I do with my clients is helping them to keep that communication going. Even if they're using lawyers, they need that legal advice, but not using their lawyer as their chief negotiator. Having conversations among themselves or with the lawyers or with a mediator, but still speaking to each other so that they don't really break all the communication that they need to have.
No, but I think very important. I mean, I think that is, it's so interesting, because actually, I think that side of things is something that people don't necessarily think about, but you run into almost immediately.
Absolutely. And then trust, as soon as trust is broken, you find yourself in a situation when one of the two is going to go and hire a very aggressive lawyer. And then things can really get inflamed very, very fast.
Yeah.
very hard to come back from that. And that's exactly what I try to do with my clients, is to keep things appeased.
Of course, and all of that is, is code for emotional distress and very expensive.
Yes, and long as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what when you see again some of these sort of things in the in the press and things, and you go such and such has finally finalised a divorce sort of 8 years on or something, and you think, wow, and that kind of that toll that must have taken on, just for sort of the human and the humans,
Mhm.
and the sort of the ripple effect on the rest of the family and friendship group, and kind of the pause, the hiatus that is caused in someone's life and those around them, to me is should not be underestimated.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the book. Can't wait to read it, and can't wait to sort of chat to you more about it when I have read it. But let's talk about you, Chloe. As it's really interesting because you've taken, obviously, you're in corporate world, you've taken your personal experience and insight, and then being, kind of almost invited to launch this service because of the sort of demand from, your friendship group, and they could see that you were going to be good at this. Let's all shine a spotlight a bit on you as a business owner and as an entrepreneur. What do you think is the most rewarding aspect of what you do and what you've done so far?
I mean, my why, my reason for what I do is because I love helping people.
Yeah.
And I love seeing the impact I can have on them and on their families. So that's really my reward. And what I was missing in the corporate world was that sense of purpose, and that willingness to wake up in the morning, looking forward to the day ahead, knowing that I'm going to be able to speak to somebody and make their journey a little bit easier, if not very much easier. And so that satisfaction I get from really seeing that impact I can have on people's journey, and shifting the experience of divorce away from being this catastrophic event that destroys everything and creates this kind of a scorched earth approach, and you starting to think of divorce really as an opportunity for that new chapter, because that's the reason people get divorced, is because they want a new beginning. And so that's what you want to be spending your energy on, not what happened before the previous chapter.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and actually, it's really interesting. You are my sort of 75th interviewee, and you're no exception. What we hear over and over again is that desire by that usually entrepreneur who's sort of broken out of the corporate world for whatever reason, and their why is so important, but typically it is taking the stress out of whatever it is that you're offering. So in your case, it's taking the stress, the pressure, the distress of this closing chapter, and pushing the emphasis onto the new chapter. But you can't turn your attention to the new chapter till you've really sorted out the closing one, and therefore kind of helping people to navigate that is the thing that allows you to feel that joy and that sense of purpose. And I think that is, again, that's hugely commendable, because clearly this is sadly a growing a growing area in our society. So if someone's watching this and they are thinking about starting a business, or they are mid along the way, and they've launched their business, and they're looking and they're going, well, that sounds really interesting, Chloe. It looks like you've got everything sort of sorted. You've got your why, which again, we bounce out of bed in the morning, and if your why isn't solid, then it becomes increasingly hard to stay motivated and to keep that mojo going.
Yep.
But if someone said to you, okay, Chloe, what advice would you give me starting a business? What would be your sort of insights that you've learned along the way thus far?
Well, I think definitely the why.
Yeah.
Why are you? Because that's going to dictate your values, how you set up your practice, how you even price, and who your ideal client is. And I think defining your early on who your client, what are you offering and to whom, is going to be key to being able to build a proposition that people can relate to. And I think sometimes people try to be all things to everyone, and usually where they fall flat, because you can't be everything to everyone, and it's better to be very good at the one thing you do than to try and serve all different purposes. So having that laser sharp focus on your why and on your service and who it's for allows everything else to flow very logically, and it makes a lot of the decision making a lot easier throughout the process.
No, very, very good, very interesting. And so here we are. You know, you've written the book, you're clearly helping a lot of people, you've worked out your offering, you know, you've got great clarity in what you're doing. If we sat down in 1, 2, 3 years' time, what would you be telling us in the rearview mirror? Where do you think you'd have taken your business?
Well, so I've just written a book. I might write a second, God knows. But I'm working on building a program to help people to negotiate their divorce settlements and to share those skills, and accessible to a wider group of people, because I've only got so many hours in a day. So that's definitely something that I would like to see take off and become part of my offerings in the next few years. But on a wider scale, I see a real trend towards people wanting to divorce in a less conflictual way. And there's been the introduction of no-fault divorce in 2022 in England and Wales, which started that journey and allowed people to divorce, you know, in DIY fashion, sometimes even without a lawyer. And I see more and more services developing to support people through that, because yes, it's nice to say you can do it yourself, but it's not quite that easy.
Yeah.
And you still need somebody to guide you through it. And so I think that's, you know, really where I would like to continue to work and to support people, and hopefully to respond to that growing demand for support through that transition, but in a way that isn't litigious or conflictual.
Yeah, very interesting, very good. Well, there's clearly so much more that we could cover, and I think, you know, in a year, 2 years' time, it'll be really interesting. You know, clearly the law has changed in the last couple of years, so there is some, you know, so there is movement on that, and that, you know, and that's really interesting. And so, you know, who knows what will be coming down the tracks in, you know, a year, 2 years' time. You know, perhaps it will be the how not to screw up your divorce too. And you know, the sequel, and but that's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much, Chloe.
Thank you.
And for anyone, you know, we'll share this across our different platforms. I know, Chloe, we're going to invite you as a collaborator so you can share this onto your Instagram as well. And we will then share this across our other platforms, across LinkedIn, across Facebook, etc. Doesn't matter who I talk to, everybody knows somebody that is at a point in their life where they're either not happy, contemplating change, contemplating separation, mid-divorce, got divorced. You know, I think there is, everybody has someone in their life that I think could A, benefit from reading this book, and B, could benefit from a conversation with Chloe and how you may be able to help them. And obviously with that in mind, be able to signpost those people to help them, as you absolutely point out, to a happier chapter in their next life.
Absolutely. And I do offer a free call for anybody who wants to just have a chat, because as we were saying earlier, it is about the person and the feel you get, and maybe just discussing their situation to see whether I'm the right person to help them. So there's always an opportunity for anyone to just go onto my website, which is the divorceandseparationcoach.com, and book a free call, and then we can have a chat and we can make it personal and we can see whether I can help them.
Very good indeed. Chloe, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your time. Good luck with the book launch. And we look forward to chatting to you again. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.